I was just saying that we're excited to have a great panel together this morning for our discussion on driving sustainability at scale. And we'll have about 40 minutes of moderated discussion with about 20 minutes of questions from the audience from you all towards the end of the discussion. And I just wanted to provide the overview for the discussion. And this is a discussion about how private companies are working towards their enterprise sustainability goals as private organizations. And today we have a unique panel organized. We have a food retailer with Aaron from Whole Foods Market. We have a software developer, provider with Patrick from Salesforce. We have Bruce from Flex, and this is they're a big company, and so best way to describe Flex, I would say, is an industrial manufacturer of many items that are used in many products all over the world. And we have Frank with JLL. And before we have the panel do their self-introductions, just a couple of minutes on myself. I'm Stan Liu with RMW Architects in San Francisco, and I also am the Executive Director for the San Francisco 2030 District. And the 2030 District is an urban sustainability initiative that's focused on working at the district scale towards performance goals, and specifically they're the 2030 challenge goals that focus on cutting baseline energy, water usage by 50% by the year 2030, and transportation emissions being also cut by 50% by the year 2030. And many of the panelists we've worked with over the last few years to achieve those goals in the city of San Francisco. And with that, I'd like to just turn it over to our panelists to do self-introductions, and as they talk about their respective organizations and what they do, if you could all just also maybe talk about something that's unique or interesting that you're currently doing at your respective companies, organizations, and just share that with the group, and we'll move into a moderated discussion after the introductions. Frank?
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. I lead our energy and sustainability services practice in the West, as well as lead our client solutions group for JLL. JLL, as many of you probably know, is a global real estate services firm. We are involved in anything really related to real estate and buildings, ranging from design and construction management all the way through transaction of the actual real estate, construction management, brokerage of leasing the real estate, managing the properties and facility management, and then disposing of the real estate. So really everything in the life cycle, except pretty much for owning the buildings. We don't own a lot of buildings. That's one thing that most people think we do, but we don't really. We manage those investments on others. We have a $40 billion in assets under management, but we don't actually own any of the buildings using our own capital. The area that I'm representing today is really more of our building management line of business. So really the operations of the buildings through facility management and property management. And that's the area where we're touching $4 billion square feet of space globally. We have 60,000 people in our company, and most of those people are in the buildings every day. The technicians, the engineers, the maintenance mechanics, the people overseeing the facility services, the events like this. Those people are our people for the clients that we work with. You're probably familiar with seeing JLL in large downtown buildings. You see our name in the lobby. We manage those buildings. But the less visible side of our business is we manage facilities for a lot of Fortune 500 corporations. They outsource facility management to us, either in a region or across the nation or globally, and our people essentially are running the buildings. And so we become very embedded in building operations across many, many different sectors, ranging from typical commercial building office spaces to industrial, logistics, healthcare, manufacturing, retail, really all building sectors we touch. And so very excited to talk today and represent sort of the built environment and operator perspective on this panel. We've tried a lot of things. We've seen certain things succeed and certain things not do so well. And that's really where we're excited to be able to share some of that knowledge and accelerate the scale of that on a global level. A couple quick comments I'll make about JLL also. In our energy and sustainability group, we are essentially we're charged with saving our clients energy and improving their environmental performance year over year over year. That's partly why clients come to us. So over the past 8 years, we've been able to save our clients $4.8 billion in energy. And we track all of that. And that is parcel of what we try to do as stewards of the built environment. We're not only helping provide the solutions, but we are actually managing the buildings. So that is important for us from a corporate values standpoint. It's important to our leadership, and it's important to us as leaders in the built environment industry. That impact is equivalent to, we've measured just last year, we've reduced CO2 by about 500,000 metric tons through our direct intervention. And that's the size or scale of maybe a company like Oracle or Apple in their latest carbon disclosures. So really, we have a very exciting place in helping these buildings get to the next level. So on the performance side, we are doers, we're implementers, and so that's very much a piece of what we learn from. The other piece is we very much are very focused on entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. That's where my role comes in, is bringing new ideas that could work, that work or have proven to work, and scaling them out to all of the buildings that we touch as much as possible. So there's an intrapreneurial part of that where we need to demonstrate the use cases, create the business case, and then get that out to as many people as possible through training, through communication, and through basically just educating people about what these solutions can bring. One thing I'll mention about JLL is we very much are focused on innovation. We have set up internal innovation councils and review processes and an awards program. I've been in the innovation review before, made it to the final round. We have a little Shark Tank type event where we sit before the key leadership executives and we pitch our ideas, and I've been to that twice. And energy and sustainability is a big piece of driving that innovation in our company. Final note is, we've been acquiring a lot of companies, especially in the technology space. Over the past about 2 years, we've acquired more than 39 companies. And now the challenge is integrating all of that. But 2 of those acquisitions were a smart buildings company as well as a technology company, a ticket work order company that helps streamline anytime you see a light bulb out or you see a leak or something that needs to be cleaned up, helping to create a seamless workflow from identifying that, whether through mobile or through pictures, and then getting that work order fixed in the facilities. And that's really changing JLL from a service-based company into a technology company, and that's the future for our company. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bruce.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. As Stan mentioned, I'm the industrial representative this morning. Some of you may know us. We were formerly called Flextronics. We rebranded ourselves. I was actually in the hallway. I was 5 minutes into a long spiel about who we are and what we do before the person realized who I was from. So we're one of the largest manufacturing services companies in the world. We have approximately 200,000 people in our employ at any one time. We run approximately 90 factories, 32 different countries. We have a very regional strategy. We still have, I think, a dozen facilities in the United States and 10,000 employees. But our largest presence is in other parts of the world. We have nearly 60,000 people now in Mexico, Brazil, Malaysia, China, of course, and Eastern Europe is another place where we have a very large presence. We helped our customers last year introduce 12,000 individual products in 12 different categories, so very diverse. My wife has gotten to the point where I'll tell her that we helped manufacture something. She said, "Of course, you manufacture everything." So a lot of consumer products, industrial products of particular relevance to today's discussion, and part of what we're hoping to do to scale things up is we actually have a $2 billion plus energy business within the company. So that includes final assembly of solar modules, production of inverters for various companies, 5 different chemistries of batteries, large-scale battery storage. One of my colleagues is moderating a panel on that subject later today, as well as smart meters. We have a very large market share in that area. We acquired a company that makes single-axis trackers called Nextracker. We're very proud to have them part of the Flex family now. They have #1 market share in that space. One thing that we're particularly proud of right now is they're working on providing that product for a 750 megawatt solar installation in Mexico. They've deregulated some of the energy market in Mexico now, and this is an incredible project that will power approximately 1 million homes down in that region of the world. Now, one thing that you have to recognize, I think, in the sustainability space when you're talking about scaling up energy efficiency and other programs is that companies are situated very differently. And one of the constraints that we have to deal with at Flex, and this is something I'm constantly explaining to vendors, potential partners, and others, is that some companies are capital constrained. And while we have a lot of cash on hand, our highest priority is to use that capital to put additional equipment into our factories to grow the top line of our business. And so when new customers come to us with projects, we have to equip ourselves in order to meet their production needs. And that's where we spend the majority of our capital. That leaves less than we would like for energy efficiency and other projects, but nevertheless, we're doing quite a bit. And one thing that we have an opportunity to do with the kind of footprint that we have, and I forgot to mention that we have about 52 million square feet of manufacturing space around the world. Sounds small now next to 4 billion square feet that Frank's company is managing, but that's a big footprint. And it gives us really an opportunity to use our facilities almost like laboratories in the sense that we can find the best technologies that will be the most effective in terms of reducing our energy consumption, reducing waste, and we do thousands of lean events around the world every year to look for those opportunities. And because we're exposed to so many technologies from our customers, we're able to selectively put some of that into our own factories. Now, one project I'll just highlight before turning the mic over to Patrick is that we are actually producing high bay LED lighting ourselves. That's one of the few Flex branded products that we have at the moment. So over the course of the last 3 years, we put in about 85,000 fixtures in 113 locations, covering about 13 million square feet of our footprint. And we're saving now $6 million a year in energy costs from that project alone. So that had multiple benefits. It helped stimulate that business within the company, but obviously had a very nice ROI for us. And so we're very pleased to do that. And we're in the midst of several additional solar installations at our own facilities right now. Our largest, by the way, that we currently have installed is a 10 megawatt installation, which is the largest in southern China on a private facility. And we did that with cooperation from the provincial government. So we're constantly looking for opportunities, and that's the way I characterize us. Even though we are capital constrained, we're trying to be very smart about it and very opportunistic. And I know we'll talk a little bit later about the goal setting and process of stimulating these things within our companies. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Patrick Flynn from Salesforce. And the software company representative, although I would say that each of you, no matter what industry you're in, works for a software company, from how you understand your customers, manage inventory, complete transactions. Every company is a software company. I have a fantastic job. I get to combine a bunch of my past experiences and bring them to bear at my role at Salesforce. I started as a building HVAC engineer. That's actually where I got my passion for sustainability, seeing up close and personal buildings often done the wrong way, misaligned incentives, miscommunication. From there, I went to work for a clean tech venture capital firm focused on everything from wind and solar investments to software-driven energy efficiency. A stint at business school, then worked for a data center company doing sustainability strategy and data mining to try to build our data centers more intelligently the next time around. And now, for a year and a half or so, working for Salesforce. I head up the company's environmental sustainability initiatives. And so Well, first of all, Salesforce. Who here is a Salesforce customer? Thank you. Salesforce has its roots back in 1999, 2000 timeframe, and was really founded on three major disruptions. One, a new business model, software as a service, a new technological model, which has come to be known as the cloud, and a new philanthropic model, what we call our 1-1-1 model, wherein 1% of employee time, 1% of product, and 1% of profit go to nonprofit causes. And I'm sure I'll come back to that last bit later, because I think that commitment to create a business as a force for good in the world has been a major foundation element for providing support for the work that I do at Salesforce. We're a Fortune 500 software company, started in San Francisco, initially focused on sales enablement, but now we've moved on to anything that allows you to understand your customers better, anything that allows you to make your customers love you. We're Forbes' Innovator of the Decade, the fastest growing top 10 software company in the world. And that innovation claim is really central to my work. My team and I, a very small team focused on driving innovation throughout the company, trying to tap into that culture of innovation and embed sustainability throughout everything that we do, from data centers to offices, our events, employee engagement. How do we realize the potential of working at one of the most innovative companies in the world in order to meet our commitment to be a force for good in the world. We've got some major corporate commitments. One, to be powered 100% by renewable energy globally. Two, was to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. I'm really excited to say that last quarter we announced we had done it. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the thinking and the strategy behind how we did it, and also a sense of urgency for why we felt like we needed to do it as quickly as possible. A couple other things to throw out there. In reaching those major corporate commitments, we rely a lot on indirect influence. We don't own our data centers. We're a major co-location data center customer. We don't own most of our offices, and so we need to work with partners in order to realize our commitments. And I think therein sometimes can be challenges, but also huge opportunities and leverage moments in order to hopefully catalyze change, not just for ourselves, but across all of the customers of a major real estate company or a co-location provider. Also in the realm of indirect influence is our reach into customers. And increasingly, my expectation is that our sustainability programs will enable customer environmental success. We are the customer success company. How can we help provide a pathway for all of our many customers to reach their own commitments environmentally or otherwise in sustainability? I'll leave it at that. I'm sure we'll circle back on a lot of those things I touched on.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Aaron Daly. I'm Global Energy Coordinator at Whole Foods Market. And it's inspiring to hear what the other panelists have shared. We are a retailer of natural and organic food. Most people who live in the United States obviously have run into us. We also operate in Canada and the UK. And fun fact, we employ approximately 80,000 people in the United States, which is just a little bit more than the coal industry. So, so our sustainability programs stem from our interest, love, and passion for food and quality in food and health expressed through food. And so much of what you see out there from Whole Foods Market in regards to sustainability comes in the form of animal welfare programs, seafood sustainability initiatives. We recently launched a responsibly grown initiative for produce. So rather than having to, for many of us, myself included, I live near many local farms. I can go down to the farm and pick the produce myself. But for people throughout the country and the world, most people do not have that opportunity. So having a standard by which you can trust that a high level of commitment to quality and to environmental stewardship has gone into the production of the produce you're buying is, in our view, a big step forward. So our environmental commitment, our sustainability initiatives extend beyond the products that we serve, and that's where my work begins, which is in managing our measly 13 million square feet of real estate. So that looks like, we were, it sounds a little dated at this point, but back in the mid 2000s, we were one of the first companies in the country and indeed the world to completely offset our energy consumption with renewable energy credits. At that time, the renewable energy industry was very tiny and nascent in nature, and really used that support to catalyze change and the growth that we've seen. So we're very proud of that fact. In more recent years, we've been investing in energy efficiency in our buildings, trying to make them as efficient as possible, and working with a number of partners throughout the industry, and many of whom are represented here in the Bay Area, as well as deploying rooftop solar and on-site generation of a variety of sources, from fuel cells to wind turbines and others. One initiative that I think has not yet really seen the light of day, but is just starting to sort of hit the headlines. Paul Hawken recently wrote a book called Project Drawdown, in which he described the major ways in which we can address climate change. And number one on the list, just above wind power, was addressing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with refrigerants. And most people are not aware of the fact that refrigerants, particularly in supermarkets, have a huge environmental cost associated with them. So I'm very proud of the work that we're doing to establish programs for natural refrigerants that do not have the environmental harm associated with them. It's, again, a very early stage industry, and one that I think it needs additional investment and interest from folks, particularly type of folks here in Silicon Valley who bring creativity to bear. I'll leave it with just one thought here in a project that we've been working on with Prospect Silicon Valley, which is called Market Zero, and something that I'm particularly proud of. Again, we are in San Francisco taking one of our existing grocery stores and throwing everything we possibly can at it to create the nation's first near zero net energy grocery store. And for anyone who's ever been in a grocery store, and I doubt that's many of you, but we use a lot of power, and just to keep all the food cold and keep customers warm and keep things flowing. So it's a huge undertaking, and we've put out the word to everyone we can to bring technologies and opportunities and ideas to bear. And right now we're in the early stage with the project, but we're reviewing those technologies and designs and theories and ideas and seeing how we can incorporate that. So I just want to put some thanks out there to Prospect Silicon Valley, to Arup, SF Environment, and to the Berkeley Lab, who are collaborating with us on that project. So I'll leave it there.
Okay. Thank you to our panelists. And as you can all tell, we have a very diverse group on our panel. And one of the sort of first questions that always sort of comes to mind as you talked about some of the individual initiatives that your organizations have taken on is, how do you start and where do you start with goal setting in your respective organizations, and with different drivers, whether you're publicly traded or privately held, or if there's a leader that is particularly outspoken on environmental and sustainability issues in your organization, or a combination of all the above. How do you go about setting those goals that eventually will drive how the organization works, either in a small 13 million square foot footprint like yourself or a 4 billion square foot portfolio like JLL's? And Aaron, you've got the mic, so if you don't mind, just jump in and talk about how you set targets.
Well, I suppose on this topic of setting targets, I think you probably started out with the exception to the rule. Our organization prides itself on its flat architecture as a company and empowering our team members in our stores, in our distribution centers, in our regional offices, and in our corporate office in Austin, Texas. Through that, we do everything we can to empower team members to bring forward their best thinking on what it means to be sustainable, what it means to bring regenerative thinking into our business practices. And it looks a lot of different ways in a lot of different parts of the country. And again, that reflects our efforts to be relevant to that community and to be speaking the language of that community and to be listening and incorporating what that community is working on. So that being said, we have, I would say, very few outwardly focused goals and commitments around our facilities. The one I'm primarily focused on is our Better Buildings Challenge commitment, which is a 20% reduction in energy intensity by 2020. And we're on target to meet that. As you might expect, with a company that is trying actively to empower 80,000 people, it leads to a very large conversation about which direction we should be heading in and what that should look like. So take herding cats and think of it at the next level, and that's how you think about our sustainability programs. But that being said, I don't see that as a negative. We have we've tried almost everything out there that we're aware of, and we're continuing to look for other approaches. And again, like I said, partnering with the communities that we're involved in. And so I can speak to some examples and details, but I think I'll leave it there for now.
Down the line?
Sure.
I think let's deconstruct goals into what to focus on and then how far to go, right? And maybe far has an amplitude and a pace. I think what to focus on, I'm sure this is not going to be new to anybody, but I think it's important for any company to focus on what they're uniquely suited to do and to take on. Aaron, your comments on refrigerant, right? A perfect example. As a supermarket, you have a unique vantage point and influence into the refrigerant marketplace, how it's used, how it's disposed of. So I think in setting goals, there's a little bit of introspection, and the word I usually use is destiny. What is the company's sustainability destiny? Walmart had a destiny to take their incredible supply chain management that brings you everyday low prices and use supply chain management in order to change how forests are harvested or fisheries. At Salesforce, as a cloud company, I think of our destiny as really electricity centric at a first level, hence our 100% renewable energy goal. The cloud runs on electricity. The cloud is a very fast growing consumer of electricity, and technology companies being innovative and this new form of electricity demand can have a voice in how we decarbonize our electric systems. When we look at our 100% renewable energy commitment, we did not put a time bound. So now moving from what you focus on to how quickly, we don't have a time commitment on our 100% renewable energy goal. In part because we're going to take a very stringent path to get there, focused on local, additional, impactful renewable energy. And if you just hold that local criteria, there are places where we have operations where it's not possible to bring about new renewable energy the way we would like. So we will focus on those ideals, get there as quickly as possible. Two great examples: we signed some virtual power purchase agreements about a year and a half ago for new wind projects. One in West Virginia, which we love because that's coal country, and also on the PJM grid where we have a large data center presence, and another in Texas where we also have large data centers. Those projects are now operational. At the time we signed the deals, they actually were projected to produce more annually than Salesforce's total global electricity consumption, but we're a growing company. Now that they're online and in this first year of operation, we expect them to not reach even 100%, maybe 50%. So we know we have to do more projects where we have the scale and the market conditions to bring about net new local renewable energy. We'll continue to do large scale projects, but where there are fantastic opportunities to work through a utility, we'll do that. And so we will take different paths. How we set goals, I think, echoing your comments, it depends on what we're after. Some of the best come from the organization. But often these big corporate-wide goals need to come from the top. Mechanically, we have a sustainability review board that meets quarterly. That includes the CFO and the head of procurement, the head of strategy, the head of real estate, the head of data center infrastructure. So some really great access to leadership, and that's the forum in which we try to present forward what's possible, what we ought to focus on, what our destiny is, and some parameters around how quickly and how best to get there.
And not to repeat the same question all the way down the line, just to maybe change it up for you, Bruce, assuming there's a similar sort of adoption system or there's a process in place at Flex, adoption really is at the root of how change happens. And given the footprint that Flex has, and of course JLL with a much larger footprint and impact in the work that JLL does, maybe Bruce and Frank just talk about how adoption works within your respective organizations. And I did a little math on the side here. Between your two companies, there's over 250,000 people that work in your respective organizations. So that's a big group of people working on behalf of what your companies have put forward as goals. And so it'd be, I think, interesting to hear how roll out program across the organization.
Sure. Thanks. So about a year ago, we went through another goal-setting exercise at Flex, and my role encompasses not only environmental but also social issues. So a lot of it had to do with labor, human rights, and for the first time, we also put in some business-related goals. And so we ended up with 20 goals, which we hope to achieve by 2020. Now, one thing you have to understand, and this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've gone through a goal-setting exercise, a couple at Flex and a few at my prior employer. Marketing is a big player in these exercises, and their influence was felt in terms of how many and how we portrayed it and so on. 20 by 2020 has a nice ring to them. Is that the right number? Is it too many? We could debate that a little bit, and we did. Now, in the case of each of these 20, what we did was we had to go through a process that involved benchmarking. It's typically very useful to do a lot of benchmarking, and we'll look at our competitors to the extent they have any targets that are publicly available. We'll look at our key customers, and then we typically try and identify leading companies whom we want to emulate in some respect. Although my lesson to you, from having gone through this a few times is it's not necessarily that productive to look at the entire universe of companies because they might be just too disparate from your own enterprise and it might not be that relevant. I don't consider ExxonMobil or Walmart or some companies of that size and nature to be that relevant to a manufacturing company. So in the case of each of these 20, in terms of driving the adoption, what we had to go to were the key stakeholders internally. Now, in the case of energy, for instance, a lot of it is centrally managed through our corporate real estate and facilities organization. So it's very important that we tied off with them to make them understand what we thought we could potentially do, show them the information. And for instance, we had gone through a science-based targeting analysis just as an exercise to see what that would produce. Discussed that extensively with them, and then unfortunately their inclination was to pull back a little bit because some of the competing priorities that I mentioned before in terms of capital deployment and so on. And then we had to go to our chief operating officer and others who were also going to be really instrumental in driving this through the company. Now, in the case of some of the other targets that we set, for instance, on the labor and human rights side, the chief human resources officer, whom I report to, and others were key players there. So it varied a little bit. Then the entire group of targets was presented to our executive staff at one of their meetings. They signed off on it. And then we began the process of figuring out how we would roll this out. Now, one other thing that I'll leave you with is in this particular exercise, we also decided we would tie our targets into 4 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals: quality education, decent work, clean and affordable energy, as well as responsible consumption and production, because those were the ones we deemed to be most relevant to our business. And so increasingly our communication will revolve around that type of discussion, and I think it's going to be very useful going forward in terms of driving our programs. But in the energy space, I mentioned we ended up with intensity targets for both carbon and electricity, despite what we were seeing some companies doing. We're not prepared to go to 80% or 100% renewable at this point. The other thing that we did for the very first time is we put out 2 targets for, as I mentioned, our business. And at that time, it looked like we were going to enter the solar module business with Flex branded modules. And the market turned downwards. We elected not to do that. We set 2 targets. One was to actually produce enough modules to power 750,000 homes. And the second was to produce those modules at an efficiency that was equivalent to or less than grid supplied energy. We're going to modify those now in light of the change in our business, but I fully expect that we'll continue to target the business component as well as our operational component.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, so talking about goals and then moving into adoption, I think one of the important parts is obviously leadership commitment. And so one of JLL's goals is, as stewards of the built environment, we want to be the company that provides the best workplace experience in the most efficient manner, economically, energy-wise, sustainably-wise. And so that really means training and educating all of our people on what to do and how to do it. A few years ago, we set a goal to to really maximize the people who are trained in this manner. So we said, okay, well, green building accreditations for people is one way that we can measure that. So our CFO at the time, who was our champion on sustainability, actually went out and got a lead accredited professional accreditation. Our CFO, who has lots of things she can do with her time and probably very little time to do it with. But she was that committed to that goal, and that set an example throughout the firm. And we now have the most green building accredited professionals of any company, any organization in the world. And that's more than, I think, like the Chinese government or the US government, right? We have more than 1,800 people green building accredited throughout the world. These people aren't necessarily all doing green things. They're not all certifying buildings, but they're operating buildings. They're working on projects. They're maintaining things. And that is important to help get the ethic throughout our organization. And with each person who learns that, 3 other people are affected or so on, right? So that's how we get adoption throughout our company. Continuous training. We measure that. I think we've delivered 16,000 hours of sustainability training to our employees in the last year. We measure all of that. We do it through webinars. We have several internal conferences every year where building engineers and property managers and facility managers attend. I teach sessions at those internal conferences to help bring people up to speed. What's happening in the industry? What are the best practices? What are the successes we're learning? And so that is really a big piece of trying to get as much of that knowledge and those values out there into our workforce.
So there's a full range of implementation, I'll call them strategies to get the message out, whether it's more of a flat sort of grassroots approach like Aaron would have with Whole Foods, or if it's through training, or the CFO is leading the way at JLL, or if it's 20 by 2020 and it's a marketing-driven strategy that gets rolled out across the organization. It's clear there's many ways to get the message out, and given that there's a whole range of sort of real estate sort of transactions that comprise your portfolios, whether you're leaseholders or owner-operators, or some other form of real estate holding, how do you work specifically at each location? And it's going to vary by use, whether it's a data center or an office building or a manufacturing plant. And for some, you're going to be more heavily weighted in one space than the others. But reconciling that against a enterprise goal, if you will, is sometimes a challenge. And then how do you communicate that so you get the best results at each location? So could you just touch on that as a strategy internally of how you get each of these local groups at these individual and highly specific uses and locations to bring their facility up to a level that contributes to the whole? And really, anyone, feel free to jump in.
I'll just start real quickly. I think in our business and probably in many businesses, you're going to apply the 80-20 rule, and that might just be shorthand for looking where you're going to have the most impact. One feature of our company is we have a single location in southern China that actually represents 20% of our footprint. This particular factory employs 50,000 people. And so there's extraordinary opportunities just at that one location. So what we focus on, I mentioned before how my colleague in corporate real estate and facilities is really key. He has 6 regional directors, including one in that particular location. And so a lot of where the real action is in his staff meetings. And so I'm constantly interacting with him as well as his 6 regional directors, trying to plant some seeds, asking them if they've considered a particular type of strategy, and then when they roll that up, helping them evaluate where the best opportunities are. And as I mentioned before, we're trying to be very opportunistic and looking for the greatest bang for our buck. And, we like to see activity at all of our locations, but the reality is some have a very minor footprint, at least relatively speaking. But nevertheless, there can be significant impact. We have a facilities director, for instance, at one of our locations, Budapest, Hungary. It's a relatively small location for us, but because Hungarian law actually requires now that they have an energy manager certified to ISO 50000 in the organization, they're having individuals take that training now, and then we'll be able to spread that knowledge throughout the rest of the organization. So that's another way to magnify the impact.
Yeah, I'll toss maybe 3 things out there. 1, policy. 2, price. And 3, influence. Policy, the best example is in our green building portfolio. So we created, the timing was perfect. The real estate group was refreshing the real estate playbook. They looked to us to try to codify our green buildings strategy and implementation, and we created an extremely simple flow chart that said, is it undergoing a major renovation? Again, we don't own all but one of our offices. Is it undergoing a major renovation? If not, hold. If it is it a large building? Then, you keep going down. Is it someplace we're going to be in for a while? And by the end of the flow, pursue LEED or equivalent gold for large major offices, and so forth. It's been extremely effective at standardizing the approach, taking the discussion out of the equation. We got approval once, and now it's more permanent. 4 of our largest office buildings are LEED Platinum at this point. Over 60% of our employees show up to work in a green building certified building each day for work. Second is price. I mentioned the achievement of net zero greenhouse gas emissions. As an aside, we also extended that commitment a little bit further when we reached that milestone and are now providing a carbon neutral cloud to all of our customers. Net zero greenhouse gas emissions as a company and carbon neutral cloud are nuanced in their difference, but very important, and it meant doing a little bit more. How did we get there? Very quickly, it goes without saying, there's a hierarchy where first you want to avoid emissions altogether. The multi-tenant platform that Salesforce, the cloud, is far more energy and carbon efficient than traditional on-premise software, 50 times more efficient, and that led to our customers avoiding about 2 million tons of CO2 last year alone. So we reduce. The green building work is a great example, but also energy efficiency projects throughout our data center operations, and then mitigate. And within this mitigate landscape, we've got our big commitment that I talked about as being primary, 100% renewable energy. We certainly are focused there. That will take time, especially to do the right way. But echoing Gil Friend's comments from the prior session, we felt an urgency to mitigate our carbon footprint as quickly as possible. The climate in its own way is screaming for help right now, not after a robust strategy. So what we did was, after this avoid, reduce, mitigate, and our focus on renewable energy, we then purchased carbon offsets, highly credible, and those that focus on social impact as well. So a great example is our investment in clean cook stoves in Honduras, changing people's lives right away, helping the climate this year. And so we've done that. That imposed effectively a cost internally on carbon. And so that's, so I talked about policy on the green building landscape. We now effectively have a price on carbon, and a program that hopefully will tilt the landscape a little bit more towards carbon-friendly decisions, whether that's where you site a data center or what hardware you purchase. And then, so that was policy and price. And then influence, we signed on to and really helped spearhead the colo buyers principles. It's a initiative out of BSR that tries to articulate in very simple, very concise, very clear terms what tech companies want to see from their co-location provider. We're building data center infrastructure globally as a species at breakneck speed. We're locking future generations into particular designs right now. How can we use our customer voice to try to articulate what we think would be a better outcome? Things like, all else equal, I would prefer a data center that has the option for renewable energy, that provides me regular data around my footprint, that has opportunities for collaboration among other tenants in that data center to drive sustainability initiatives. 6 items total, and in less than a year, we've got over $1 trillion of market cap signed on behind these things. Salesforce, Facebook, Intuit, Oracle, Adobe, Autodesk, on and on. So hopefully that's an influential lever that'll drive change globally.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll share a little bit of a different perspective. I mean, it's certainly additive. Our organization operates in, as much as possible, as close to your home and the home of others as we can. We want it to be easy for you to come and buy your food, or, whether it's prepared or otherwise, and get it home. As such, we have, right now, 465 grocery stores, throughout the 3 countries we operate in, and throughout residential communities across the United States. Again, I think, unlike many of our competition, every single one of those grocery stores is unique. They're different size, different shape, different technology in there, et cetera. And so it is frankly impossible for us to take a silver bullet approach. Rather, one of my colleagues has termed it the silver buckshot, because it's really a matter of addressing every one of those buildings individually, and it's a gargantuan task from a certain perspective. And some might ask us, well, why do we take that approach? And I think I've stressed why we do. We're in the business of selling food, and we're in the business of creating a relationship with the people who eat, and therefore we want to have that relationship, and that means we need to look different. We need to be different in the different communities that we operate in. So that being said, we run into a variety of challenges. I'll give you a few examples. We lease the vast majority of our buildings. Generally, they're on 20-year leases, but you can imagine once we've gotten 10, 12, 13 years into that, operating that building, we start to see, hey, you know what? Since we opened that building with those nice metal halide lamps, LEDs have come out, and they're immensely more efficient. We'd love to replace them. Well, so the question comes in, well, have we actually paid for the lights that we've got? Do we have enough time expected in this building to actually justify putting in new lights? Do we have the right in our lease to put the new infrastructure in? Not a good example with LEDs, but say, for example, we wanted to put solar on the roof. Do we have the right in our lease to do so? If not, do we want to go and renegotiate our lease with our landlord so that we can actually put solar on the roof, which we know is good for us, it's good for our team members, it's good for our customers, everyone's asking for it, but can we actually get it done? So again, that's a question that we ask on a site-by-site basis across 465 locations. And the way that we are working on that today, I work for what we call our global support team. It supports 12 regional teams that manage on the order of about 50 stores apiece. And we work together, again, Pareto analysis approach to look at where are the opportunities, where do we focus our attention, and then we're looking at energy efficiency and on-site generation and waste reduction and waste stream diversion and packaging, and all of it in the context of that local community and the kinds of partnerships that we can create. So just wanted to give you a flavor of what that looks like. I think it's very easy to sort of gloss over, hey, this is how we do things and we're all really good at it. And certainly we think we do a lot right. But again, I think we have a lot to learn and we're continually learning. And I think it's probably more relevant for the people here in the room to understand some of the challenges we face and how we approach them than it is to perhaps hear about sort of the easy wins that we've taken on. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, great. Thanks, Aaron. We'll be running out of time here in just a minute, but I have one more sort of question for the panel. Turn it over to the audience for questions. And if you could just summarize quickly the greatest opportunity you see in the near or long term for your organization, what maybe the greatest challenge may be in sort of getting to your goals, current federal sort of policy environment notwithstanding. So with that, I'll just turn it over to really all of you. If you could just do the quick rundown, we'll turn it over to the audience.
I'll keep it quick so that Frank can have an opportunity to speak. Yeah, as far as opportunities, I spoke to refrigerants. I think that's an opportunity not just for our organization, but for our industry at large. Huge opportunity. Again, also I mentioned the Market Zero pilot project we're undertaking in San Francisco. I think we are going to establish a new benchmark for what it means to build a supermarket. Once people see that we have the ability to do it that way, it's going to be hard to justify doing it any other way, or at least that's my hope. As far as challenges, we are right now in a position as a company of going from all of our decisions being made at a store level to certain decisions naturally being better suited to an aggregated, centralized approach. Wall Street certainly believes that's the case, and there are efficiencies to be gained from doing that. We're trying our very best to match the gains we can have in efficiency with the lifeblood of our organization, which is empowerment of team members and engagement with the community. And so we're trying to find that sweet spot. And I think that's going to be the challenge we're going to be faced with going forward.
Thanks, Aaron.
Opportunity and challenge. I think for all, stepping outside of Salesforce for a second, for all of us, the business opportunity of sustainability is at hand. Seraphim out of Harvard Business School has been doing research for years. It's proven at this point, those companies that focus on corporate sustainability, that tie it to their core strengths as a business, outperform companies that don't. The investor community is seeing it, and so we've got that going for us. Consumers are willing to pay a premium for products that are brought about responsibly. So there's a business opportunity to capture that as well. So from the investor to the consumer, you've got the economic forces coming to bear. We also heard about all the economic forces of the cost of solar, the cost of storage, so all of that coming as well. I think the challenge is, in that realm, the challenge is, how do you communicate that you're being responsible and that you're tying corporate sustainability to your core? And we've got all sorts of different reporting standards, metrics, GRI, SASB, Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a lot of noise out there, and that's a challenge. So hopefully we can find a way through that in some sort of standardized fashion that allows not only those that are doing great things to shine, but also those that aspire to do great things, a very clear roadmap of what to follow and when and how to think about it.
I think the opportunity that excites me the most is a circular economy opportunity, and I think we're uniquely positioned to have some impact there. I didn't mention, in addition to our own operations, we work with approximately 14,000 suppliers. So those are our tier one suppliers, and that doesn't even talk about, tiers 2, 3, et cetera. Despite our operations being very lean and efficient, we still generate over 40,000 tons of waste each year, scrap, metal, plastic, et cetera. Our recycling rates are close to 90% annually, but we should be minimizing that waste. We can essentially reverse engineer the manufacturing process. That's what we're most intimately familiar with. We should be able to reduce that amount of material, working on packaging and the processes itself. So I see great potential for us to do more of that in the future. We already do a lot of remanufacturing and refurbishment, but that should become more the norm rather than the exception going forward.
I'd say a challenge and opportunity. I think the challenge in buildings is, in transportation, we often talk about the last mile challenge, right? You get on the bus or the train, but ultimately you got to get to wherever you're going, and that's the last mile. In buildings, the last mile has changed from users operating buildings, right? Very few of us walk into an office, a commercial office building, I'm going to say, and do anything, right? Now everything's automated. There's sensors, temperature, lighting, everything's going to do its own thing. The last mile really in buildings is who's operating the building. And that's people, the technicians, the engineers, the maintenance people. Now, a lot of it is getting automated, but ultimately, until we have robots changing light bulbs or fixing motors or doing all of that, there's still people involved in doing all of that piece of that behind the scenes. And for us, that's the last mile in buildings, and getting those folks trained, understanding, operating, especially in an industry where you have a lot of folks who are aging out of the industry, 30 years in the industry, operating a building. The talent that's backfilling that is short, to be honest, and also needs to be trained up. Buildings are becoming more complex. It's not just hardware, it's hardware and software. And every single building operator now needs to be trained in both to really be able to work in buildings of the future. That is a big challenge. On the flip side, the opportunity is we believe automation is going to really drive a lot of that advancement in building operations, but especially automation that helps address that last mile. So we've developed a software platform called IntelliCommand that essentially is a smart building system that runs buildings as efficiently as possible. But more importantly, it's a fault detection diagnostics. It works with the BMS. It can connect into the lighting and everything and sensors. But the most important thing is it loops back with that last mile, and we can, through work orders, we can actually educate the building operators. What is it that you need to do? How high of a priority is it? What dollar value is this leaky valve or broken damper or broken light fixture costing you? And how do you need to fix it? And through that, we can create a smart building that actually meets that last mile need, works with the building operators, and up levels the overall building performance. That's the great opportunity, I think, we're seeing, combined with all the data that IoT promises, right? The orders of magnitudes of data that's going to be flowing through a building from here on out. And how do we make that building actionable for the doers in the building to actually make it operate better?
Thanks, Frank. Questions from the audience?
Craig Lewis with Clean Coalition, and Clean Coalition is a nonprofit. We focus on accelerating the transition to renewable energy in a modern grid. And one of the areas that we're really focused on is community microgrids, which is where you not only use distributed energy resources to replace the fossil fuel-based energy system, but you also use it to bring additional value. And additional value is measured in things like resilience. You can get community resilience from distributed energy resources in a way that you could never get from remote resources that are coming over long transmission lines. So one of the toughest things to address is large loads, with local renewables and energy storage and whatnot. Large loads, particularly large constant loads. Data center is the absolute, right? That's, if we can figure out how to solve DER, addressing data center needs, you've solved everything. Everything else can be easy in terms of that. So the question really might be mostly to the Salesforce gentleman. Have you, as Salesforce, looked at using local renewables for not only provision day-to-day energy for your data centers, but also the resilience and not necessarily getting all of the diesel generator backups out of there, but at least some of them, or keeping some of them off and not having them run as
Okay, careful what you wish for. I could talk for like 2 hours about this. John Kumi, a researcher out of Stanford, would call that last point smarts, not parts. We don't need two of everything. We need to know when things are going to break. And we need to move workloads away from those assets that are struggling. Point number one. Point number two, again, we don't own our data centers. So we work closely with the co-location providers to try to express our willingness and our commitment to 100% renewable energy. Can they go to their utility or can they go to their rooftop and figure out ways to provide us a service that's powered by renewable energy? That would be great for us. Generally, in the data center world, the roof and the insulation, the amount of sun that hits a roof and the efficiency of a solar panel, you're going to get single-digit coverage from a roof relative to the amount of energy consumption going on at the servers inside. It's just per square meter, way more energy dense from a consumption standpoint than from a generation standpoint. So you're always going to be looking at something in the parking lot, across the street, up the road. And then I think the biggest thing at play here is this new form of energy demand that we're spearheading, software that's running all of your companies, that's housed in data centers, is unlike any form of energy demand we've ever known. It's liquid. So we can theoretically move workloads at the speed of light. You have to do a lot of great things in software and security and data privacy and data sovereignty to be able to do it, but why not move loads where the grid is more reliable or systems more efficient, where the sun is shining, where the microgrid has spare capacity? Now, the opportunity there is arbitrage. And so if we can build the capabilities in software, the marketplace to understand where capacity exists and what the price and qualities of that capacity are, market forces will wring out waste in this equation, and all of a sudden a failing economy that has stranded electricity and depressed consumption will have workloads flocking to it, and a beleaguered businessman will see an unexpected overseas paycheck for his server's use that he's got in his garage. I don't mean to trivialize the complexity of getting there, but this is an opportunity that we've never had before. We've always had to get the energy from the ground and bring it to my car. Now, so bring energy to where the demand is. Now we can move demand where the energy is. And I think microgrids have a fascinating part to play in that.
You guys talk a lot about technology and what you're doing from that point of view. I'm wondering from this sort of human behavior change point of view, have you had to deal with enacting behavior change with your employees or maybe the employees of the companies that you're representing? And what are your strategies, what are your takes on that to help advance your sustainability?
Yeah, for us, that's a constant. It's not a program we initiate and end. Our team members are essential components of our business. They're the lifeblood of our business. And, as you might expect, we do have turnover. We definitely have to train team members. Team members have to work under sometimes harsh conditions. If they're, say, for example, stocking ice cream, they spend a lot of time in a freezer. They might want to leave the door open, might want to get all those nice curtains we put in the way out of the way, try and warm that freezer up as much as possible, make it comfortable. Obviously, from an energy consumption point of view, from a product integrity point of view, that's a bad idea. So training, as well as listening to our team members to understand what their pain points are so we can address them in ways that are energy efficient, that are sustainable, that maintain product integrity, et cetera. So that's just one snippet of an example with a freezer door, but across the board, the process of retailing, the engagement with our customer, the process of managing all of the infrastructure of a supermarket, all of that entails constant training and adaptation in regards to how we maintain the best environmental footprint, if you will, while also offering the best service that we can.
I think in many organizations, the reality is that the individual employee doesn't have a lot of control over the environment. And certainly in an industrial environment, we don't expect the average employee to be messing around with the HVAC system. We certainly hope not. But even in that environment, it shouldn't be overlooked that your employees are effectively your eyes and ears. And that's why among the thousands of lean events that we do every year, many of them are energy hunts, essentially. And in addition to those lean events where we've got people from the factory floor helping us identify where waste might exist and what we could potentially do to eliminate it, we've also now trained our internal audit team, which is another resource available to us. So they essentially are now doing sort of the equivalent of the energy treasure hunts that General Electric pioneered. So when they go to the sites and they mobilize frequently all around our global footprint, we have a very streamlined checklist for them to probe a little bit on our energy management systems, as well as some obvious opportunities. And that's been another area where we've been able to identify additional things to work on. So all of that takes a little bit of training, education, and so on. But everybody gets very excited about the ability to contribute to something that seemed out of reach to them before.
Okay, one more question.
Super quick. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different responses given what I've heard today, but is there ever a time within your organization maybe where environmental initiatives might surpass financial initiatives? So say the return on investment might be lower, but the carbon impact of an offset might be higher. Is there a time where that might be the case?
Absolutely. It's not an easy sell for sure. But a good example, we began installing rooftop solar systems back in the early 2000s. I can tell you that the price point was just a little bit higher than it is today. And in many respects, those were not good financial deals for us. But we recognized both our contribution to the development of the rooftop solar industry, as well as the injection of enthusiasm that it would provide for our team members, as well as the loyalty that we would get from our customers. And so while it's very difficult to quantify that from a financial return perspective, it's good business, and we're proud of that work. And again, it's difficult to do, but we do little bits here and there.
Quickly, I think sustainability and energy efficiency initiatives also often have to overcome this payback hurdle, right? But there's no payback on the person who makes the decision to replace the sign in the storefront, right? The sign never pays for itself, maybe indirectly through new revenue from people coming into the door, right? My point being, to have to rely on energy and hard financials alone. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, there are plenty of numbers out there to help the business case, whether that's retaining and attracting top talent, pulling like-minded customers closer to you. There are harder to quantify, harder to model financial metrics at play here that go beyond just energy efficiency alone. And one of the prime examples, and one of the best, is if you take an office building, usually you hear about 330, 300. In this part of the world, I usually do 550, 500. But per square foot per year, you've got about $5 going to utilities, $50 going to rent, and $500 going to pay the salaries of the people that fill the space. And so that $5 energy lever is 100 times smaller than the employee lever in a financial model. Right, and so exploring how do green building initiatives help with reduced sick days and employee productivity. If you start tapping into that, even in loose, fuzzy ways, you're accessing a lever that's already 100 times bigger to pull in your financial model. So I would explore just expanding the scope of the economics.
I think Patrick's last point is a really important one. Even with the considerable expense that we have for energy, it's probably only 1% of our operating costs. And so payroll, and in our case, procurement of all the materials that are going into all these products that are our responsibility. So reducing inventory might have a much greater impact. But nevertheless, both at Flex and at my last company, there are often many very attractive projects that you can identify. And I've heard both the CFO, current one, and my last one say, find me more of those projects. And you can particularly improve the ROIC in some cases in the United States, prime example with the availability of rebates from utilities and so on, and they start to look just outstanding at a certain point. And so finding more of those helps build momentum. And then, of course, if you've got margins like Patrick's company and a lot of cash on hand, then you might be free to do much more.
I just say working in this field, developing the business case is ultimately the biggest challenge. And you got to loop in all the values of your company, of all the different things that will generate benefit from something to create that business case and make it really compelling. So, I mean, we often joke, sometimes we talk about the marketing team's budget is often tens or hundreds of times that of the real estate team's budget, right? So think about, well, in our case, when we're managing buildings for investors, we want to retain tenants. And so that makes a community garden payback maybe, or beehives on the rooftop where you can bring the honey back to the tenants or something like that. That's not going to pay off financially, but ultimately it creates awareness, it creates a differentiation, and it helps make people change the human experience, which gets back to the 330, 300 type of thing.
I'd like to thank our panel, and let's give them a round of applause. Thanks.